Hey, welcome to a new episode of As the World Churns. I am Andy Levy here, as always, with my delightful co-host, Danielle Moody. Danielle, we seem to be having some episodes of Ice Ice Baby, as I like
Mm-mm.
to call it.
Mm-mm.
We've got a bill working its way through Congress that will be introduced in Congress by Alex Padilla and Cory Booker that will ban ICE officers from concealing their identities, i.e., wearing masks, not having any identifiable gear on, with that says ICE on it or whatever. And this obviously is in response to what we've been seeing over the past bunch of months, which is masked men sometimes in camouflage, kidnapping people off the streets and not identifying themselves as federal agents and not presenting any kind of warrant or anything like that, and basically acting as if the law does not apply to them. So Padilla and Booker, both obviously Democratic senators, are introducing this bill. Who knows how far it'll go, given that it's a Republican-controlled Senate. But it's one of those things that shouldn't be necessary because it
Mm-hmm.
should just be you can't do this. But that's not the world we live in. So unfortunately, it is kind of necessary, and I'm glad that they have at least uh, started the process on this.
So there are a couple of states where I feel like the state legislatures have taken up legislation to do just that, which is to try and create some type of, oh, I don't know, separation between mass thugs and criminals and who is supposed to be federal law enforcement. Because I can't think of any reason whatsoever why a federal law officer would need to cover up their faces, would need to remove their badges, would need to remove any personal identification, would need to use ghost tags on the vehicles that they are shoving people into to kidnap them and bring them to detention centers. I cannot think for whatever reason why ICE agents need this type of cloak and dagger routine, whereas while regular law enforcement have badges, have clear faces, you absolutely know who they are. The presumption here that I feel like that we don't discuss under the Trump regime is that these officers of the federal government are given carte blanche to do whatever they want, however they want to get it done, so long as they are picking up, beating up brown people and black people and throwing them in prison. And that there are no rules. Right? Because if you are harmed, there was I cannot remember where this happened. There was a ICE vehicle that rear-ended a car full of people that they thought were quote unquote undocumented folks. And if somebody can tell me what state that was in, rear-ended them, find out that those people are lawful citizens of the United States. And guess what the ICE agent did? Took off. So it was a hit and run, right? And guess what? As you're trying to pull up the plates of said vehicle to open up an investigation, you can't find them. So tell me what the difference is between criminals, people who have been impersonating ICE agents, whether it's been to rob people, to sexually assault women, etc., and what we are seeing happening by these masked men. So I think that it is important for one legislation to be passed, but I think that all states should be taking this into their own hands and not waiting on this fucking feckless federal government to do anything that is actually going to protect the constituents, the citizens of this country.
Yeah, I think it was Los Angeles where
Ah,
that incident happened. But the thing is, I'm not positive because you could be talking about another incident where they did the same exact thing because who the fuck knows these days? But yeah, and there have been other incidents of them ramming cars to arrest protesters, not even,
mm-hmm.
not even the people they are supposedly going after, whom they shouldn't be going after, but people protesting. Their ICE agents are ramming cars to arrest them. And again, like you said, it's totally lawless and it's basically the Wild West. They've been told they can act with impunity. Look, the thing is, thanks to the Supreme Court, I guess the argument is, hey, the president is telling us to do this, and that must be a lawful order because the president, in pursuit of his duties, can't break the law.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it seems like all of this is taking a toll on these poor ICE agents, and they are reportedly there were multiple reports of ICE agents being unhappy, miserable, burnt out. Physically burnt out, emotionally. You said there's no good reason why they should be wearing masks. They say they're wearing masks because they're afraid of being doxxed, i.e., their identities made public. In a case like this, if you're a federal agent and you're afraid of being doxxed because people don't like what you're doing, you should maybe rethink what you're doing instead of covering your
Just an
face.
idea.
Like, just a random thought I'm going to throw out there that if you're a federal agent and people really, really, really hate you, maybe you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. I don't know, Danielle. Am I reaching there?
Here's the thing. This is what I'm curious about. So Donald Trump in the big billionaire budget bill gave a record amount of money, right, to ICE. We're talking about now their budget is operating somewhere, well, will be operating somewhere in the 175 to 180 billion-dollar range, right? ICE now having more money than other nations' full-fledged militaries, right? That aren't the United States and aren't China. And I wonder, is it built into that? Is there going to be more pay for ICE agents, or is it just going to be more militarized toys for them to be able to use to show their show of force? Because the other reports that are coming out isn't just about their morale, but also about the fact that people are quitting, right? Like they're quitting the job because it is getting to them. I couldn't think about why, watching, like literally beating up people and watching children cry as you leave them on the sidewalk and scoop up their parents, never to be seen again. Like why that would be, breaking your spirit. And maybe you want to go do a different fucking job. But the fact is, I wonder if in that ballooned budget is actually increased pay to entice people to want to do this kind of soulless type of work or not. But something tells me when it comes to Donald Trump, and they don't really like to pay
Yeah.
people. So I'm pretty sure it's just going to be for the toys and detention centers that are being built to feed their donor base, who they're feeding contracts to, and not to the actual people on the ground doing the terrible, immoral boot work.
Yeah, I'm guessing also not a pay raise, but probably more agents making the same salary. Because they're overstretched as they are because, we're not in this country supposed to have secret police that kidnaps people off the street because of the color of their skin and kicks them out, puts them in a detention center or some kind of camp here and or kicks them out of the country. So of course they're overextended. They shouldn't be doing what they're doing. So yeah, I'm guessing a lot more new troops. A bunch of people have raised the alarm about the ICE thing in this bill being potentially the scariest part of it. I know AOC has spoken strongly about it and how it really is setting up, if you want an arm of the authoritarian government, it's looking like ICE is going to be and is planned on being the main one. That seems to be their strategy. Those are the people that they're going to use. And ICE they're really touchy about being referred to as a secret police. The official ICE Twitter account is very mad at Brad Lander, who is the New York City controller and who has recently become almost as big and as great a white ally as I am in his support for Zoran Mamdani. And the fact that he himself got arrested for protesting an ICE deportation thing. And they've been going hard at him because he has said New York City is not going to stand for this shit, which, getting back to your point earlier, that states and municipalities they have their own powers to do this. And Brad Lander's been very outspoken on this. And he really hurt ICE's feelings by referring to them as the secret police, which just struck me as odd since they're the ones running around with masks on and without identification on their clothing or vehicles. So again, if you don't want to be called the secret police, don't be the secret police.
It's just an idea. Just throwing
Yeah.
things at the wall
Yeah,
here, seeing what
spitballing.
sticks.
We're just spitballing here.
Okay, so I don't know whether to take this as good news or bad news because all of it just seems like it inches its way to the Supreme Court, which has been MAGAfied. But here we have, in a most recent decision by a federal judge in New Hampshire. This is according to the Seattle Times, a ruling on Thursday prohibiting Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship from taking effect anywhere in the U.S. Judge Joseph LaPlante issued a preliminary injunction blocking Trump's order and certified a class action lawsuit, including all children who will be affected. The order, which followed an hour-long hearing, included a 7-day stay to allow for an appeal. Now, if you remember, right, the Supreme Court basically just nullified lower courts' ability to be able to order nationwide injunctions, right? This is different because it is a class action suit, which the Supreme Court said is an avenue, is a path that can be used, as opposed to a singular case. And so this group of people, which is on behalf of a pregnant woman, 2 parents and their infants, are being represented by the ACLU, would essentially state that the order that Trump put out is illegal. And why is it illegal? Because it goes against what clearly is written in the Constitution's 14th Amendment, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. I don't think that you can get clearer than that, nor do I think that you need an actual legal degree in order to make sense of that amendment. And yet, Andy, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'll start by saying, look, this is a good decision that the judge made. I will quote, because she's way smarter than I am, I will quote a friend of the pod, Madiba Denny, who said, I'm going to read what she posted on Blue Sky. She said, the Supreme Court said federal courts can't do nationwide injunctions under the Judiciary Act. Try a class action. And then Madiba says, that's not a great alternative, but this judge said, okay, bitch, here's your class action. The class is everybody. So I think that really puts it as well. I ain't going to put it any better than that in my own words. So just going to use hers. But yeah, this is why, I mean, this whole thing is just wild because, as you said, this is, you can't issue an executive order that says what the Constitution says doesn't count. Like, it can't work that way. And yet the Supreme Court has said, well, but we can't say that's true for every jurisdiction. We can't, it's just, the whole thing is insane. As Madiba said, the idea that you have to make it a class action suit is not great. And it's going to take judges like this who are going to say, okay, I'm making this a class action suit, and it's on behalf of every single child around this country, every single baby born in this country, regardless of the citizenship status of their parents, because that's who's affected by this. And the idea that the Supreme Court threw out there that this needs to be decided in multiple jurisdictions and not nationally when it's a constitutional issue, I don't understand the mental gymnastics. Like, I mean, Simone Biles is jealous
of what? Correct.
Of the gymnastic skills of Amy Coney Barrett and the rest of the justices who went along with this, because I mean, it's just unreal. So yeah, great decision by this judge. As always, what that means is going forward is who knows with the Supreme Court.
But I mean, here's the thing with me is that this Supreme Court is basically setting up the entire breakdown of the United States of America. Because if now I am a pregnant person and I'm in New York and I give birth in New York, that means that my child is a citizen, not of these United States, but of New York. And if for whatever reason I got to go to New Jersey, then now that child is no longer deemed a citizen. Like, so we're setting up citizenship by state and not by
Yeah.
country, which is
Yeah.
essentially basically a legalized
Yeah.
civil war that we're going into to
Yeah.
say what states have rights and what don't. Because that's what this, I mean, again, I just read what the 14th Amendment was. Very clear. I don't understand the bullshit interpretation that this moggified Supreme Court is giving, except for the fact that they just continue to give Donald Trump win after win after win in his desire to have this country all white again. That's what he wants.
Yeah.
And that's what they're
I,
doing.
I should say though, Danielle, there's no reason you should ever be going to New Jersey.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I hear
Except
there
maybe
are
to a
nice
Giants
parts.
game. Maybe a
It
Giants
is
game.
the Garden
No,
State.
I know. And I'm just joking. So if you're a resident, if you're a New Jerseyan,
Don't come for me, come for
uh,
Andy.
it was just a joke. I love my New Jersey brothers and sisters.
Let's pivot off of the lawlessness of the Supreme Court for a moment and take a look at the policies that are coming out of Ice Barbie, Kristi Noem's Department of Homeland Security that essentially may have, and I'm saying may, but seems pretty likely that they have gotten in the way of providing aid to Texas during critical times. So CNN reported that Kristi Noem, whose department oversees FEMA, recently enacted a sweeping rule aimed at cutting spending, right? But she spends a lot of money on hair and makeup. Every contract and grant over 100,000 now requires her personal sign off before any funds can be released. For FEMA, CNN writes, where disaster response costs routinely soar into the billions as the agency contracts with on-the-ground crews, officials say the threshold is essentially pennies, requiring sign-off for relatively small expenditures. They go on, for example, as Central Texas towns were submerged in rising waters, FEMA officials realized they couldn't pre-position urban search and rescue crews from a network of teams stationed regionally across the country and weren't able to take actions until Monday, more than 72 hours, Andy, after the flooding began. Is this part
Yeah.
of the waste and fraud? Like 72 hours when you had floodwaters that came in at 2 stories in an hour and children's lives were on the line and we were waiting for her fucking signature?
Yeah. I mean, look, in a just world, this would result in investigations and potentially prison time. I'm not quite sure we live in a just world right now, so I'm not sure I see any of that happening. I would like to see an investigation into this though, because it's absolutely shameful. You know, I think I mentioned on the show the other day that that they were sending Kristi Noem to Texas as opposed to the head of FEMA.
Mm-hmm.
And how weird that is because it's
Mm-hmm.
usually, the head of FEMA, for better or worse. We all sort of remember George W. Bush, which is with his heck of a job brownie, with I think it was Mike Brown, the head of FEMA under Katrina, who in fact was not doing a heck of a job. But look, they have, and I think, maybe you'll get into this a little more later, but they have basically, there's so few people, I think, in the inner circle, in Trump's inner circle. And so we keep seeing, like, Marco Rubio has 5 different jobs now,
Yeah.
and things like that. And then we're seeing Kristi Noem being the point person for everything, like, and FEMA just gets sidelined. And so of course she feels like, I'm gonna make this thing where now you can't spend more than 100 grand unless I personally sign off on it, which is insane, absolutely insane to bottleneck something like this up. As you said, $100,000 is not even, that's like 5 minutes worth of FEMA's time and resources, that are usually desperately needed ASAP. So the idea that she has done this, obviously with the blessing of President Trump, whether he understands it or not, it is shameful. It's causing people to die. We keep saying on the show they want us to die. And this is example number 9 million and something of that exact thing.
Yeah. I mean, will she be hauled in front of Congress? Probably not.
Yeah.
And even if she is there, she's just going to lie through her teeth. So
Yeah.
there's that.
Yep. Jules Boykoff has written 6 books on the Olympics, has been published in multiple professional journals, along with media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, The Nation, and The Guardian, where his latest piece is entitled, "The IOC Handed LA the 2028 Olympics. Now Trump is Weaponizing Them." He joins me now to talk about it. Jules, thanks so much for coming back.
Thank you, Andy.
So I want to get into the specific reasons that, as you say, the LA 28 Olympics are now a slow motion train wreck. And there's one scary one in particular that we'll talk about. But I want to start with what's a more general term, and that's sports washing. For our audience that may not know what this is, explain what sports washing is.
Absolutely. So sports washing is when political leaders use sports events to deflect attention away from chronic social problems happening and to try to make themselves look legitimate and powerful on the global stage. It's typically associated with the big sports mega events like the World Cup of soccer or the Olympic Games. And it's also typically associated with authoritarian countries. There was a lot of talk around sports washing when it comes to Qatar around the 2022 Men's World Cup of soccer. But I think it's really important to talk about how sports washing definitely can apply to places like the United States, a putative democracy on the slide toward authoritarianism perhaps, but still a putative democracy nonetheless. And that's what I try to lay out in the article that you're talking about, is how the United States right now is engaging in sports washing, or is ramping up the machine to engage in sports washing when it comes to next summer's World Cup and then the Olympics in 2028.
So these are both the World Cup and the Olympics are big deals to Trump, aren't they?
Absolutely. He has staked a lot on his relationship to sport, and he's been involved with sports on different levels, and it actually played a pretty important role in his re-election campaign this last go round, where he just hung out with people and talked about some of the stuff around UFC, not even talking about politics directly, but being political through the apolitical vector, if you will, of sports. And so, yes, he's very interested. And he's also, beyond that, he's talked about how he wants the Los Angeles 2028 Summer Olympics to be a success and how he wants to do everything he can to make it so.
And it's wild because it's not like every country that hosts the Olympics doesn't do some form of sports washing. I think whether they're an authoritarian country or a democracy, whatever, there's a very nationalistic urge behind hosting the Olympics and celebrating your country and whatever. But the ones that we usually hear about when we're talking about the egregious examples are usually like, the 1936 Olympics in Berlin that Adolf Hitler staged, and you hear and the World Cup in 2022, I guess it was in Qatar, like as you said. It's wild that we are sort of approaching that category, if not in it now, right?
You're absolutely right. And you and I agree that even democracies like, say, France around the 2024 Olympics engaged to a certain degree around sports washing. An element of sports washing that I haven't mentioned or really talked about, but I know we want to, is how governments use these mega events to bolster their security apparatus, especially because they become so big and they have become a legitimate terrorist target. I mean, look at Atlanta, 1996 Olympics there.
Sure.
Or look at the fact that the 2014 Olympics in Sochi, Russia, were deemed a legitimate target by Dokul Umarov, the Chechen rebel. And so because of those reasons, democracies and authoritarians alike, they use these events to bolster their security structure. And if you look at that big, ugly bill that just passed last week, there was $1 billion set aside for security for the 2028 Olympics, another $625 million for the World Cup next year. So the U.S. is getting ready, at least on the security front, for these events, or at least using these events to bolster their security structure, no question.
So explain what a national special security event is, because this is a key part of what you write about here.
I agree. So, and a lot of people don't know about it, but national special security events started in the 1990s under President Bill Clinton, in part in response to that terrorist attack I just mentioned in Atlanta at those Summer Olympic Games. And what it basically does is it puts under the control of the U.S. Secret Service a number of security and intelligence forces around the United States at the federal level. It brings them together to work together to ostensibly, supposedly ward off terrorism. It gives them a lot of free reign in the city. An example of this would have been a Super Bowl. They do that for Super Bowls. They do this for Republican National Convention, Democratic National Convention. Back in 2019, you might remember at the Super Bowl in Atlanta, 21 Savage, the rapper, got nabbed by ICE there. That's in part because ICE has free reign. So they hand over these national special security events to the Department of Homeland Security. So right now that means Kristi Noem. And they have free reign, including their premier policing division, ICE. Now, that is alarming for a lot of people in Los Angeles who are hosting matches in the FIFA Club World Cup this last month. And then we'll be hosting matches for the actual World Cup of soccer next summer. And then, as we've been talking about, the Olympics in 2028. And so my idea in writing about this was like, hey, Los Angeles, you need to be aware of this, because Karen Bass can get up there on the camera and say, hey, get out of here, federal officials. But they've already signed on the dotted line. And there's this national special security event that supersedes anything that Mayor Bass might like to do there.
And as you point out, this is already in effect and has been for quite some time, right?
I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's like a world record, if you will, of national special security events. President Biden kicked it into effect in 2024, some 4 full years in advance of the Olympics. And so, yes, the ICE already has, to a certain degree, free reign under the auspices of the national special security event.
And one of the things that this sort of triggers is secrecy, right? And you know, as you say, we've been seeing already, obviously, ICE agents in Los Angeles masked with no markings on their camouflage uniforms or on their vehicles. And a lot of that is okay because this is a national special security event, right? And that's part of that?
I believe it is part of it, and that's what I'm trying to disentangle right now. What is under the national special security event, and what is just a President Trump administration run amok, basically giving free rein to ICE no matter what, if there's an NSSE, if you will, in effect or not.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, these guys from ICE look like they just came right from robbing a liquor store and then to the job to try to start deporting people from the streets of LA, where, by the way, there are some million people or so who are undocumented there. So this is no small thing. When they marched through MacArthur Park as if it was some kind of military invasion, that sends fear waves throughout the city of Los Angeles. Now, I don't want to say that no one's reacting, because there's a lot of people fighting back. I think that's really important. But in order to truly fight back in the most fully informed way, you need to be aware of things like the NSSC. You need to be aware about the networks of mutual aid and support that are in your area.
And also, as you said, something like this, the NSSE, it hamstrings local officials to an extent, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think we're going to see this come into focus more and more the closer that we get to the World Cup next summer. Karen Bass can take to the podium and almost say whatever she wants, but they can basically be superseded by the NSSE whenever the federal government deems it appropriate. Again, this was signed by Joe Biden in 2024 that kicked this into effect. And if they want, they can always just kind of look back and say that.
Yeah. And look, obviously, the idea with one of these things, it's not necessarily pro-fascist. Like the idea, as you said, these events are legitimate terrorist targets and whatever. And so the idea behind this was, hey, let's give this a designation. It means we can bring more, manpower in and everything. But you put that in the hands of a Donald Trump, and suddenly you've got what we are already starting to see there.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned at the outset, Andy, that I study the politics of the Olympic Games. And so I
Yeah.
would scope back for a second and say that anyone who hosts the Olympic Games uses the event like their own private cash machine to get all the special weapons and laws that they never
Mm.
be able to get during normal political times. I mean, Japan passed an anti-terrorism, quote unquote, law back in 2017 ahead of their Olympics, where it passed a number of laws that basically were meant to curtail the actions of activists. And so this happens time after time after time. But what I am saying is the NSSE turbocharges these dynamics and takes power out of the hands of local officials in ways that are really deleterious. And I do want to kind of shout out two groups, if people want to follow further what's going on in Los Angeles, who've been on this NSSE thing for a long time, two activist groups. One of them is No Olympics LA, a smart coalition of groups from Black Lives Matter to Stop LAPD Spying to many other groups who wrote a really important piece about the NSSE early, and they've been on this and they're fighting against it, trying to engage in political education in the community. And same for the People's City Council of Los Angeles, this collective of activists there that are fighting out in the streets that have also been trying to raise up this issue. So it's not just me writing for The Guardian. There are a lot of people out there on the ground fighting back and trying to raise awareness in Los Angeles and elsewhere about this issue.
Yeah, for sure. In addition to this NSSE, there's other things that are going on that are potentially turning everything into, as you said, a slow motion train wreck. Talk about travel bans.
Oh, this is totally a part of the train wreck. I'm glad you mentioned it. So Trump just keeps lumping more countries onto this travel ban of countries that are not allowed to come to the United States. Now, he's saying that there's going to be a carve out for athletes that are coming for the FIFA World Cup in 2026 and for the Olympics in 2028. However, we just saw that a women's basketball team from Senegal that meant to come to the United States to train to get ready for qualifiers for the Olympics, half their team and half their staff were denied entry. They were not given visas to come train in the United States. We saw a ping ponger from Brazil who all he did was go to a big tournament to get ready for the Olympics in Cuba, and that put him on a suspicion list, and he wasn't allowed into the United States. And that's not even to talk about the fans, the family members of these athletes who might like to come over. That's not even to talk about Iran, which is like the first country on the travel ban list. Is Iran, that it qualified for the 2026 Men's World Cup, going to be allowed into the country to participate? Will FIFA kind of rig it? FIFA is the world governing body for soccer.
Yeah.
Will they rig it so that Iran plays their matches in Mexico and Canada and thereby sort of sidesteps the repression that they might experience here in the United States? Part of me kind of hopes they do, just to kind of give fans from Iran that break. So there are a lot of ifs in this equation here. And, you know, Gianni Infantino, who runs FIFA, is basically Trump's right-hand man. I mean, you could see
You can't say that. FIFA is the most above-board sports organization in the world, Jules. How could you say that?
I know. Total blasphemy, Andy, and I apologize for having to make it to you. But yeah, if you go on Gianni Infantino's Instagram feed, it's basically post after post about how much he loves the president. Their picture of Donald Trump, pictures with Eric Trump. He dragged players from Juventus Football Club that were in town to participate in this Club World Cup, dragged them into the Oval Office and propped them up behind Trump. And Trump asked them about, would they allow men to play on their women's team or would they allow women to play on their team? Just like using them like political props in his anti-trans games. So Gianni Infantino is a problem in and of itself, but he doesn't seem to be too worried about Trump. In fact, he's been enabling Trump with all the stuff that we've been talking about every step of the way.
I'm also struck by the idea that, like, if you are from one of these countries, would you want to come here to participate in the Olympics or the World Cup, knowing, you know, if you're seeing videos of masked federal agents kidnapping people off the streets who have brown skin in the overwhelming majority of the cases, would you feel safe and secure coming here to participate in any of these things?
Hey, that's a great question. And I think you're going to see more athletes asking themselves just that. I think especially when it comes to those Olympics, if we continue to see what we're seeing today, a lot of the athletes that are financially insulated, say they play in the NBA or something like that, they don't need the Olympics as much as the Olympics needs them. they might be able to say, no way. And they can make a statement even as to why they're not participating in the Olympics because they don't agree with what's happening. Now, athletes from lesser known sports, this can be their one chance to maybe make back the money that they paid up front to train for it. Those folks I can see understandably being willing to take the chance. But, there's a long way to go before we get to 2028. A whole lot more of the horror show could unfold before then. And there just remains so much to be seen when it comes to those Olympic Games in 2028.
Yeah, it's wild. Kristi Coventry, she's the current head of the IOC. And as you point out, you say, what a time for her to be the head of the IOC. Why is that? Explain.
Well, first of all, Kristi Coventry is a decorated athlete in swimming. She's the first woman to be the president of the International Olympic Committee in its storied history. Side note, they actually didn't even allow women to become part of the organization until 1981. So this should not be confused with some sort of proto-feminist organization. She's the first president from Africa. She's from Zimbabwe. And you might think that, hey, we're turning a new page and because of all those reasons I just gave and new leadership and all that. But the flip side of all that is that she is the previous president's kind of right-hand woman. He was really rooting for her to take over the job, and a lot of people think that she will pretty much conform to the way he did things. Second, we know full well that when it comes to dealing with Donald Trump, he's a misogynist, he's a bully, and she's going to have to stand up to this guy, and it's not going to be easy for anyone, let alone someone who's new on the job. So she really has her job cut out for her. I'll be interested to see how she handles Donald Trump moving forward, and whether she actually moves forward with any kind of meaningful reform on all these different issues that face the Olympics today, whether it's the explosion of costs associated with the games, whether it's the increasing exclusion of trans athletes from the games, or whether it's this juggernaut named Donald Trump here in the United States who's going to become inner ear soon enough.
What I realized, one thing I didn't talk to you about, and that affects all of this, is the relationship between Trump and Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. And it's not a good relationship. We know that. How do you think that antagonism will play into the planning for these Olympics?
Yeah, I think it's actually really important. On one hand, as we were talking about, Donald Trump is probably not too keen to pass up on a chance to sports wash. So he's probably going to do what it takes to stage the 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Olympics. On the other hand, to make those Olympics happen in 2028, they not only are going to have that security budget, but they need money for transportation. The officials, including Gavin Newsom in California, have asked for some $3.2 billion for transportation funding to get largely for buses to get people to these events. You think Donald Trump's just going to hand that money over to his arch rival who could be running for president in 2028? Hell no. We both know that he's going to make him plead and beg for that. And so if he even is going to give the money at all, he might just lump it on the backs of California taxpayers to deal with. I wouldn't be surprised. But this creates another opportunity for Trump to have leverage over Newsom and to stick it to his arch rival Newsom, as well as to Karen Bass in Los Angeles, for whom Donald Trump has no love either.
I'm starting to think, Jules, that the people who didn't want the Olympics to be held in Los Angeles might have been onto something.
Ha! Yeah, well, those folks in LA, they know what they're talking about. No Olympics.
Yeah.
They are a very informed group of activists. They've got some real talent on the team, some video makers, some people in Hollywood back them. And they're a group to really keep an eye on. They've been on this for quite a long time, and they deserve a lot of credit for the analysis they do.
Oh, absolutely. I guess sort of an exit question. How do you see this playing out? What's the worst case scenario that you can see coming out of the sort of combination of Donald Trump, the NSSE, the Olympics, and the World Cup?
Worst case scenario, I try not to let my mind go there too much, but just total lockdown Los Angeles, and basically the feds just take over in the way that we saw a glimpse of at MacArthur Park the other day when they strolled through there all armed up, gun turrets ratcheted to the roofs of Jeeps and so on. And that they just do a lockdown, and it becomes, if they even are able to stage these events at all, it's under lockdown conditions like we would see in like Argentina at the World Cup a long time back. That's like worst case scenario. And if you would have asked me like a year ago whether I thought that was possible, I would have thought that's a little bit too much. But because of the aggressive nature of the Trump administration in its first few months in office, unfortunately, that's just not too much anymore to be thinking about.
Yeah.
And so that's what I fear could happen, is that the United States federal government uses the opportunity of these sports mega events to ratchet up its securitization, to make it harder on people that want to just come here from other countries to enjoy a sporting festival, and then pivot that infrastructure of repression on people here in the United States as well, citizens and undocumented folks alike. That's like in my darkest moments, I start to think about that. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
the NSSC gives Trump way too much power to make that transition all the easier.
Yeah, that is scary stuff. And yeah, I'll join you in hoping that it doesn't come to that. Jules Boykoff, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's just so interesting to me.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate the opportunity to have a chat with you again. You take care.
Folks, I am so happy to welcome back to As the World Churns, Glenn Kirschner, who is the host of Justice Matters. He has a kick-ass Substack that if you are not following, then you are missing out on all of the legal news that you need to be connected to. Glenn, I start out today, remembering when you and I started talking, which now, my God, is years and years ago at this point. I think it was in the first Trump administration when we were going through, the Mueller report, and when you were working us through all of these different situations. And at every point in turn, we said, it's going to be this. This is what's going to take him down. It's going to be this. This is what's going to take him down. And here we are, 10 years into Donald Trump, into Trumpism, second regime. Everything is crumbling around us that we've understood about America. And I guess the question that I have right now, as a 30-year, former federal prosecutor, does the rule of law matter anymore, given what we are seeing on a day-to-day basis come out of this regime?
Danielle, I guess I was hopelessly naive and maybe even foolish, because having dedicated 30 years of my professional life to upholding the rule of law, upholding the Constitution, yes, prosecuting people, but making sure we were doing it in a way that honored all of the defendants or the target's rights, statutory, regulatory, constitutional. I naively believed that the rule of law was equipped to deal with even a criminal president. And, I think I have to admit I was wrong. Now, does the rule of law matter today? It does, because it is still keeping us a civilized society, though far less civilized, particularly as our leadership, in air quotes, is concerned than it used to. My catchphrase is justice matters. It's not just my catchphrase. It's my mantra and my mission in life. And my reason for existing right now. This is not what I had on my bingo card when I retired from the Department of Justice. But, people get so angry at me sometimes when I keep closing out every daily YouTube video with, justice matters. And they yell and they scream and they cuss, and I welcome it all, because I think it's good to vent, quite frankly, especially among family. And there are millions and millions and millions and millions of Americans who I consider family, because they care about the rule of law. They care about our democracy. They care about diversity and decency and kindness and equity and empathy and inclusivity and all of it. That's our family. That's our American family. And I say, you wouldn't be so angry when I say justice matters, and you wouldn't yell and scream at me that, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. See, to me, that proves that to you, it does matter. You wouldn't be so angry at the injustice if justice didn't matter to you, if the rule of law didn't matter to you. So yes, it still matters. The problem is we have folks in power who don't give a rat's ass about the rule of law, about the Constitution, or about the rights of our fellow human beings, whether documented or undocumented. Human beings are human beings, and they don't care about those things. And the problem is, Danielle, we have fewer and fewer places to look to help us enforce the rule of law and breathe life into the rule of law. So we still have the federal court judges. Just before we signed on, we've got yet another temporary injunction against Donald Trump's unconstitutional attempt to Sharpie out of the Constitution the constitutional guarantee of birthright citizenship. We just had a class action certified by Judge LaPlante, who was a George W. Bush appointee, and he issued yet another temporary injunction after the Supreme Court tried to say, hey, we don't like these nationwide injunctions. But the Supreme Court also said you can still do a class action. You can still use the Administrative Procedure Act to get at the same thing. You just can't do nationwide injunctions. So guess what? The federal courts have pivoted. They've said, okay, we'll accomplish the same thing by the vehicle that the Supreme Court said is still available to us. And just moments ago, a federal court judge did that. So the rule of law is not dead. It's hanging by a thread. And the next question that I know you're going to ask me, and I'm not going to have a good answer to, is but the Supreme Court.
Right.
And it's always
that is
the Supreme Court. I have no way around that because there's no appeal from an unconstitutional ruling by the Supreme Court. That is traditionally where we have to rely on the co-equal branches of government and the checks and balances, which today are dead. They're dead.
So here's what I have tried to wrap my mind around is that the lower courts, the federal courts, and lower meaning under the Supreme Court, are trying their best to resuscitate the rule of law. They're trying their best to hold our Constitution together with like duct tape in a dream right now. And every time that these cases float up to the Supreme Court, the Roberts Court shows us that they are MAGAfied, shows us that they don't even need to hear opening statements and need to hear testimony because their decisions have already been made. And when you hamstring the federal courts, the federal bench in the way that they've had, and I appreciate the fact that they're trying to pivot, it just shows us, I guess, that they're not going to kill the Constitution in one blow, but it's going to be this slow, painful death. And so when you talk inside the legal community right now, tell us what like the sentiments are as these federal judges are being worked overtime in terms of the cases that are coming out. I mean, I don't. Again, I've never seen federal judges in the news in the way that they have been over the last 6 months.
I've never seen them write opinions calling out a criminal president and his blatantly unconstitutional executive orders, or calling out these third-rate DOJ lawyers who are going in and beclowning themselves by arguing to federal judges. No, judge, the unconstitutional thing Donald Trump did is constitutional. And the judges, the trial court judges, the circuit courts of appeal are having none of it. You know, they're doing the judicial equivalent of, oh, F you, are you kidding me? And they're saying things that are getting these lawyers referred to bar counsel for ethics investigations. I don't know why DOJ, I mean, Danielle, the new lawyer they sent in for the last Abrego Garcia hearing, I forget, she has an Irish last name. I'm half Irish, so that's the only thing that registered with me. She's been at the Department of Justice since like May, and she's 3 years out of a clerkship or what. I mean, it's absurd because they don't have legitimate, ethical lawyers available to go in and defend the indefensible because these people are going to get referred to bar counsel. Maybe they're enthusiastic about losing their law license, but that's the direction, in which they're heading. And I don't think any of this is sustainable. I don't know. I don't know how it all ends. None of us do. I hope it doesn't end with the end of our democracy, but it's not sustainable. Unfortunately, so many of my friends and former colleagues are fleeing the Department of Justice, and I don't blame them. They're not obeying in advance. They're saying, I will not do the corrupt, unethical bidding of Donald Trump or Pam Bondi. I won't do it. They have to leave or they're going to be fired. And I don't think anybody has to wait to get fired and then decide whether you want to spend the next couple of years in court fighting an unlawful termination. I don't blame people for leaving. But at some point, it's not just a brain drain from DOJ, it's an ethics drain. And, this is going to implode. This is not sustainable in the long run. I'm not going to get to the points of light. I'm going to save that till the end because I'm trying to find and even convince myself that there are still some dim points of light out there amidst the Trump-induced darkness. And I think they are there. I don't know what we do with a Supreme Court that seems determined to say the Constitution is unconstitutional and we will not be constrained by it. What do you do with that?
I don't know, because we've never faced anything like it. And I've been asking people, when you look at Supreme Court decisions over the 250 years of this country, and there have been some disgusting ones, right? Like you can go to Dred Scott, you can go to Plessy versus Ferguson, you can go to these court cases that pretty much, solidified the fact that Black people, formerly enslaved Black people, were not people, right? Did not deserve equal treatment under the law, and you go back and I look, and somebody said to me the other day, they said, well, here's the thing. Those courts didn't know any better because there had never been any precedent.
Mm.
The Roberts Court knows better and has decades upon decades, if not centuries of precedent. And these are the decisions that they're making. So which one is worse? And I was like, damn.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And, but what I think the Dred Scott, the Plessy versus Ferguson, the Korematsu, and I don't want to put Dobbs in that same category, but look, Dobbs, talk about we should have known better. Dobbs revoked the constitutional right to privacy of women to make their own reproductive health decisions. But what all of those cases prove to us is the Supreme Court sometimes acts unconstitutionally. Just because they say, we are pronouncing it from our ivory tower that the Constitution now means this, it doesn't mean they're fucking right. They weren't right in Plessy. They weren't right in Dred Scott. They weren't right in Korematsu, and they're not right today. They're not right in the fucking head, but they're not right today in so many ways, right? So what it also tells us is that moving forward, if we can keep our republic, there will be opportunities to correct the egregious, unconstitutional wrongs of today's Supreme Court. That's little consolation for those of us who are living through it, and for people who are losing constitutional rights rather than gaining them or holding fast to the ones they have. But we are in this for the long haul. We have no other choice, right? We have to keep fighting. And Danielle, when you talk about, 10 years ago or however long ago it was, we were talking about, you and me, the Mueller report and how, look, oh my God, the Trump-Russia investigation. Look at all of these obstruction of justice crimes that Donald Trump committed. It's the Jack Smith. He's going to get it. Well, what we should have learned, what I should have learned, is that no prosecutor's going to save us. No judge or justice. Sotomayor and Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson are trying mightily to save our republic and our Constitution from the violence that's being done against it by the radical right-wing ideologues, the 6 Supreme Court justices. But no politician is going to save us, because there are a lot of great politicians out there trying to do what they can. But Danielle, if any one or group of Democrat politicians could have saved us, they would have saved us by now.
I know.
So guess who's going to save us, if anybody? Us. We're all we've got.
Yeah. Before I let you go today, too, I again, staying on the Department of Justice and staying on the fact that it is completely, devoid of any ethics, doesn't believe in following the law. Overnight, Donald Trump has decided to make good on yet another campaign promise of being, I am your retribution, and going after his political enemies. He's now opened up criminal investigations into John Brennan and James Comey, the basis of which loose at best, but it doesn't matter, because in the world of MAGA, which we've now all been sucked into, all that matters is perception. Facts don't matter. And
Yeah.
so talk to us about the fact that there is no basis for opening a criminal investigation, but that's not going to stop Pam Bondi from doing what Donald Trump tells her to do. Just like, oh, we were supposed to get the list, the Epstein files. I could have told you, we were never going to see that because Donald Trump is all over that. So you were never going to see the inside of that. So given, again, my opening question, does the rule of law matter? Does it matter that there's no basis for opening up in a criminal investigation? If Donald Trump wants it, he's going to get it.
Yeah. If we weren't in the legal upside down, of course it would matter that he is basically saying, I want convictions in search of a crime. I don't really care about the evidence of the crime. I just want revenge against people that I perceive did me wrong. But I'm glad you asked, because let me give you 5 data points as to why this latest punk move by Donald Trump will go exactly nowhere. Prosecutions against Brennan and Comey, and I'm previewing the Justice Matters video that's going to go up in a few hours. 1, John Durham has already conducted this investigation exhaustively, right? Remember the horrific Investigate the Investigators probe that Bill Barr launched because Donald Trump didn't like the fact that he had been investigated for the Trump-Russia connections or for all of his obstruction of justice crimes. So, of course, Bill Barr, his henchman, his consigliere in the first go-round, ordered that the investigators be investigated, and that included the Comeys and the Brennans and so many others. And John Durham found nothing to say that Brennan or Comey should be criminally pursued. Nothing. And they used the grand jury. They used subpoenas. It was a criminal probe, and it petered out. There was one FBI lawyer who was found to have lied, I think altered an email, and that made it into an application for a FISA warrant. And that person pleaded guilty, as well he should have, because he violated the law. That was about it, right? 1, that's the first reason. This has all been done before, and there was no there. 2, you know who would be the best defense witness if Comey or Brennan were ever prosecuted? Donald Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. You know why? He was the acting chairman of the Senate Intel Committee that investigated all things Trump-Russia. And he concluded, here's his quote, I would put him on the damn witness stand as my first defense witness. He said, first of all, no probe into this matter, the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation, no probe has been more exhaustive than ours. And he said every witness interviewed by the committee stated that he or she saw no attempts or pressure to politicize the findings. The findings stand, and Brennan and Comey did nothing wrong. So Marco Rubio would be what we call a Brady witness, providing devastating evidence in favor of Brennan and Comey against the DOJ if they ever tried to prosecute these 2 men. That's reason number 2. Reason number 3, little thing called the statute of limitations. Hypothetically, if Comey and Brennan did anything more than 5 years ago when this probe was up and running that could be viewed as criminal, they can't be prosecuted because they've timed out. They are time barred, and a judge would dismiss an indictment based on the statute of limitations for vindictive prosecution. When Donald Trump says, I want these 2 mofos criminally investigated and prosecuted, that is the mother of all vindictive prosecutions. And these cases would be dismissed, and federal court judges would, figuratively speaking, cram these cases down the throats of the DOJ lawyers who had the bad judgment to walk into court and try to support these prosecutions. And then here is the 5th reason. How many people has Donald Trump said he will prosecute? Let's see. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Adam Schiff, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, Jack Smith, Miles Taylor, Christopher Krebs, now John Brennan, James Comey, right? And who is the OG of the Donald Trump enemies? That would be Hillary Clinton. Remember?
Right.
Lock her up, lock her up,
Lock her
up, lock her up. So I think this, and none of those people, and there are more, none of them have been charged with a misdemeanor, never mind indicted for any felony crime, because none of them committed crimes. So Danielle, maybe the safest place to be to guarantee that you're never going to be prosecuted for anything is to be on Donald Trump's enemies list, because none of them have been prosecuted. Because as you say, it's really for the value of announcing you're
Yep.
being criminally investigated, and the fear and the threat that involves. It's no different than when Donald Trump said to President Zelensky, you just open. I know you want this congressional money. I know you want weapons to defend your
Just
people
open an
against
investigation into Biden.
Russian aggression.
Mhm.
Just announce an investigation into my
That's
political
all I
opponent.
need.
That's all I need. That's the same thing he's doing every fucking day with his enemies. I would bet a full buck, that's my betting limit, none of these people will see so much as a misdemeanor charge brought against them.
I mean, we'll have to leave it there today, Glenn, but it's just, again, we continue to say to ourselves, where is the bottom?
Yeah.
Where is the bottom? How far is this going to go? Will we see an investigation into Hillary Clinton? Will he drag Barack Obama before the court of law? It doesn't, like, you get to a point where none of it matters, right? Because all of it is a show and a show of force. And that's the escalation that we're seeing with this regime. And I fear that the weaponization of the courts is just in its beginning stages, because they're largely, aside from the lower federal courts, the Supreme Court has been complicit in the unraveling of our Constitution. So,
and the militarization of our
and
streets.
that too.
And when you say none of it matters, on the one hand, none of it matters, but the flip side of that coin is it all matters in aggregate, because it is only when we, the people, the only ones who will save us, get so effing fed up with the abuse of power and the abuse of office and the mistreatment of people that we're going to get out and do what we need to do, right? We're going to march, we're going to protest, we're going to rally, we're going to stand up, we're going to speak out, we're going to scream from the fucking rooftops, we're going to do it peacefully. Let them engage in violence. I don't say this cavalierly. Let them bring out the nightsticks, or let them try to pull up a Kent State on us, because that is sometimes what galvanizes us to say, done. You are done. That is the point that I think we're going to get to, and I just don't know when.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend, for keeping your eye on everything that we need to be paying attention to as it pertains to the rule of law, and for holding out hope that justice actually does still matter. We appreciate you.
Great being with you, Danielle.
All right, Danielle, close out another week of As the World Churns. Who's your fuck that guy? It better not be a former reality star. That's all I'm saying.
It's hard, because there are so many inside of this administration. But here's the thing. Overnight, the Trump administration has decided to basically decimate NASA and cut 2,145 jobs. According to documents obtained by Politico, most employees who are leaving are in senior level government ranks, depriving the agency of decades of experience as part of a push to slash the size of the federal government through early retirement, buyout, and deferred resignations. The documents indicate that 1,818 of the staff currently serve in core mission areas, such as science or human spaceflight, while the others work in mission support roles, including information technology or IT. The fact is that on top of this devastation and this utter brain drain that the Trump regime is instituting across agencies that are critical to our progress as a country, and also to the world's development as it pertains to space, guess who he's put in charge of NASA? Yeah.
Do it. Don't do it.
That would be real world road rules head of transportation, Sean Duffy, who I shout out to Rolling Stone, whose title said "Man Afraid to Ride Subway," named head of NASA. Yeah. Trump tapped Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy to lead the space program on an interim basis. The fact is, this regime doesn't give a fuck about America. It doesn't give a fuck about our standing in the world. It doesn't care about anything that has to do with growth. Everything that they are doing is about decimation. Most recently, Andy, this week, France welcomed their first 8 science refugees from the United States, science researchers who are now going to be working at university in France. And the French are putting in millions of euros to bring in more science refugees, engineers, and et cetera. Because guess what? Folks now have no place to go in the United States. And so the brain drain that we've been talking about, that maybe happens in some places that are taken over by fascists and authoritarians over years, is happening in 6 months. And so who is going to be left behind in the United States? Underskilled workers, because the skilled workers are going to flee to go to nations that will support their work, their grant work, etc., and welcome their intellect in, while America falls behind, decades and decades behind, in just a matter of months. So bravo, Trump administration. You're doing a bang up fucking job. Well done. Fuck all of those guys. But most importantly, Sean fucking, I don't ride the subway because I'm terrified. And now I'm in charge of NASA. Fucking real world Duffy. I hate these people so much.
Yeah, no, it's grotesque. It's so bizarre to be living in a country now where the brain drain is people leaving. I mean, I think most of my life, the brain drain was people from other countries coming here, whether it was the Soviet Union back in the day or other authoritarian countries, or even countries that weren't authoritarian, but that just didn't have the resources that we had, whatever it was. And to watch that, like you said, overnight in 6 months, to watch that do a complete 180 to scientists not wanting to come here, to scientists not wanting to stay here, to scientists who are not white, not being welcome here. It really is remarkable in every bad sense of that word that we're living through this right now. The idea that Sean Duffy, who I'm pretty sure since he's been transportation secretary, I don't feel like a lot of good things have happened. I feel like there's been some issues with the air traffic control system in our country and a bunch of other things. And the idea that he's now temporarily in charge of NASA is just the dumbest fucking thing in the world. But this gets to what I was talking about a little earlier in the show about how there are so few people that Trump seems to want around him or that he trusts, that he keeps giving them more and more portfolios, whether it's, again, Marco Rubio with 5 different jobs, or now it's Sean Duffy, who's already the transportation secretary, now being the NASA administrator. And we're seeing this over and over again as the sort of the core group gets smaller and smaller. And who knows what the reason is for this, whether it's, Trump is demanding more and more from loyalists, like there are so few people he trusts to be loyal, or whether it's someone else making these decisions, because Trump is, there's not much going on up there at this point. I think we all see that. But it's a real problem when the people are incompetent to begin with, and then they just keep being given more and more jobs. So yeah, fuck all these people.
So, Andy, how will you close out this godforsaken week with your fuck that guy?
Well, my fuck that guy is going to be a Republican senator named Thom Tillis. I'm always proud when I don't call him Mel Tillis, who was a country singer, I think. He announced about a month ago, he said he's not going to run for re-election. Mm-hmm. And so now that he's not running for re-election, he's become one of these very, very courageous Republicans who speaks up against Trump, something he wouldn't do a month ago. He said the big stupid bill was bad and that it was going to hurt people and take Medicare away from people. And he's now come out and said he regrets that he cast the deciding vote to confirm Pete Hegseth as defense secretary. And I mean, okay, look, better late than never. But this pattern of Republican congressmen or members of Congress, Republican senators, finding the semblance of a spine once they don't have to worry about Donald Trump primarying them by supporting a challenger. I'm tired of it. I'm just it's like I'm not stupid and whatever. I know most politicians are spineless and care more about being reelected than about the people they're supposed to represent, the people they're supposed to serve. But this is just, it's so egregious. And it just seems to happen over and over again, where you get these people who won't say a bad word about Trump, won't say a bad word about anything Trump does, will go ahead and vote for his shit over and over, will vote to confirm his clearly unqualified people. No, fuck those guys. This is what Tillis told CNN. With the passing of time, I think it's clear Hegseth is out of his depth. Really? With the passage of time?
Passing of time?
Yeah. You couldn't have figured this out from everything before you voted to confirm him? Like, again, I don't think you're that stupid. I think you knew damn well back then that he was not qualified to do this and that he was out of his depth. But you put that aside and you put your country aside to vote for something that you thought you would benefit you, or at least wouldn't hurt you, because if you did the opposite, you were afraid it would hurt you. And that is the definition of cowardice, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm sick of these people finding their a little, a spare vertebrae once they decide they're not running for office. So Tom Tillis and all y'all who are doing this, fuck those guys.
You know what? I pray that they find comfort, like a comfortable spot in hell, every single one of them, because that isn't even a little bit of courage that he's shown. These people have been in Congress longer than most people have been alive. They have known better. They have seen better. They've backed Republicans who they know, Republican presidents who they know were better than Donald Trump. And they put forth this clown car to destroy America. And now on his way out, he wants to offer his thoughts. Keep your fucking mouth closed in the same way that you've done the last 10 years under Donald Trump, because you can do no one any good anytime fucking soon. So Tom Tillis and the entirety of the Republican Party, fuck those guys.